So, where were we before pizzas? Well, not really near sleepy anyway. Code reuse. So, React encourages very small components. You can build your larger components out of lots of small parts. When you read through the guides, when you have a look at what people are doing, it almost gets sort of ridiculous where people just have a single HTML tag that's wrapped in a React class, and they're really building really tiny components, and you think this is completely over the top. But then when you realize that they're repeatable, and actually they've got loops that are generating them, and it's all it sort of flows, and you suddenly go, oh right, that's why you want to use a React component, even if it's just a thin layer over a button, like I've got on my file over there. Packaging markup and JS together, it puts all of your code about a specific feature or a specific component in one place. And that sounds, when you say it, you just go, oh, that's really straightforward. But actually, when you think about a lot of certainly the way I've been writing JavaScript and HTML recently, is I very much kind of kept that distinct line between JavaScript and HTML, which means that when I want to change a component, so say I want to change the markup because there's some kind of need to kind of either make the HTML more semantic or change the view or add extra classes or anything else, I kind of change the markup and then I go, right, now I've got to go and find the JavaScript file that edits that markup or does something with it. And you kind of go, all right, that's okay, I'll go and get those and switch them around. And then if you're doing some kind of templating on top of that, you might even have 3 files to manage. And then if some of those are server-side rendered, then you end up with 4 files to manage. And actually all of them are just concerned with this one component that might be an unordered list or a button or something. So the idea of having a single JSX file that has the component in it makes a lot more sense. And it's about separating your concerns based on what you're doing, not what you're writing. So binding inputs, you can probably guess where we're going with this. Because your markup's made in memory, you don't need to have the same kind of amount of selectors and DOM traversals. So back in the golden age of document get element by ID, when everyone kind of put different IDs on everything, and they were like, you'd see Stack Overflow questions where someone would go, yeah, I'm making dynamic elements and I'm running out of IDs because I keep putting, and you see like, div number 1734, where they've kept putting them in and putting new unique IDs because they want to get them out again. React skips all of that selector stuff by creating it in memory. So suddenly you've got a variable that refers to it, and you can just talk about it like any other object, any other piece of code that's bound up inside of your process. It provides access to standard DOM elements, DOM events as properties. So again, it feels horrible, it looks horrible, but actually it makes a lot of sense. So we've got this onClick, which is pure sort of 2001 JavaScript right there. That's binding this emit event to when you click on this button. That's a lot less code than having to go add event listener, create a new function, bind it all in. It's actually, if you think of it as a shorthand, it makes a lot more sense to use that and actually define it as a property. And it also falls with the line with the idea of kind of JavaScript of using functions as variables to pass in. Because a lot of the time when you're passing in properties, if you use these curly brackets, it evaluates what's going in. So if I put a pair of brackets after that, whatever emit it returns would be passed into that onClick event. So you're passing in properties into a class, and that kind of makes more sense. So yeah, a classic JavaScript problem is listening for events on something that hasn't been made yet. I think we've all potentially done this sort of thing where you're giving the user the capacity. I mean, for example, in Lionel, I want to add a new coin. This little guy here, I want to add a new coin. I'm creating new DOM elements here. And in other JavaScript libraries or in another situation, I would have to listen in for the rendering event. I would have to wait until I rendered it. Then I would have to go back into the DOM, find the element, bind the element, and go, right, each one of those destroy buttons or each one of those edit buttons, you'd have to go in and find it and connect it up. There is another way around this, which is the idea of live binding, which people have had around, which was it used to be called jQuery Live, and they got rid of that and switched it over to the on syntax in jQuery 2. But the idea is you listen for events right at the top of the node, or right at a higher level, and you go, right, I'm going to listen for all the click events on this sort of button from the parent element. And although that's very clever, it doesn't sit in terms of thinking about what you're listening to, because you're listening to a parent to see if a child gets made that's new that then gets clicked on. Whereas React because React is creating it all in memory ready to go, it's already bound before it goes into the DOM. So you don't have to go through all that process of trying to attach it. All these GIFs are very funny, by the way. You'll have to take my word for it. I'll put them up online. Accessing state. So state within UI tends to get littered around. It tends to get everywhere. You tend to kind of find yourself with sort of a menu that's left open. And you don't normally think of that as a state. You think of that as just kind of a bit of visual fluff. But by kind of keeping all the state in React, right? So the way React handles state is that you set it on your utmost component and you pass it down through properties in. So you give each property the bit of information it needs to render the UI. And it kind of trickles down through the app. It's just really cleverly done so that when you want to change something about the app, you change it at the top and say you've got a whole load of attendees for a Suffolk Developers app and you want to say which ones have had pizza. You just kind of pass in a list of people who've had pizza, and all of the individual child elements all will know because they're all rendered in the flow. It's kind of, I'm not describing it very well, but because the state's traveling in one direction, it means that it's very consistent. You don't end up with one element which thinks that the state's in one form and one element where it thinks it's another. So if we have a quick look back on Lionel, so we've got this JSON description here. Actually, I'll do a new game, new level. So at the moment, our JSON is very, very simple and very, very straightforward. I've got an empty array of points over here, and you can see my points table is also empty. There's nothing here. And also, there's no points showing on our display here. So I click, and then I click again, and that's 2 points. These three bits of information, the XML, your HTML table, and the SVG, will all always be in line, because whenever I'm changing anything, it's being changed at an abstract level at the highest point of the application. So if I then go in and edit this, and then I edit this Y attribute, and move it down, I'm editing one of the child nodes, but it's not going back up the tree, so it's going round. I don't know if I'm making any sense.
You're changing at a higher level and stripping down.
Yeah, but because when you edit a lower level, you want to bypass the whole of the tree and go back to the top again, and that's where you set your state, right at the very top, which means it trickles down again. One of the issues with bidirectional stuff is that if I change it over here, and I change it over here, it ends up with a conflict. It doesn't know which one to take seriously, which one to kind of follow with, and you also end up with feedback loops as well, which was something that Facebook, in nearly all their talks, they talk about it. I don't get it very often. Maybe I'm not writing complicated enough stuff, but it's kind of, it's one of those things, once you're using it, you don't really think about it, but it really does solve a lot of problems, a lot of big problems. Sorry?
Single source of truth.
Yeah, that's one of the phrases. And freedom. That was going to be a. So yeah, React takes care of the view aspect of client-side app. So what you do with your controllers, what you do with your routing, what you do with your business logic, how you package your JavaScript up for the most extent, entirely up to you. You can use your own languages. People use CoffeeScript, ECMAScript 6, TypeScript. It's just JavaScript, so you can do what you like with it. You can fit it together very, very neatly, very, very quickly. It sits quite well. You can run it through multiple transpilers if you want. You can uglify it, minify it, do what you like with it. And you can lean into it as much or as little as you like. So for Lionel, I've really, really lent into it, and everything is sitting within some kind of React component. I might well get to a point where I go, right, none of this is Vue stuff anymore. This doesn't make any sense for me to be editing any of this in React. In which case, I'll go into a separate JavaScript module and talk about it between the UI and the model itself with events. So unlike some libraries where you pick them up and you go, all right, I'm going to learn this language, I'm going to learn this library, and they go, right, you're going to build a giant monolith app and you've got to build it our way, all the way through, and you've got to have our own file types and all sorts of other clever stuff. React, you can just render to a tiny bit of your app and just try it out, and you can go, oh right, I've got a little chat widget in the corner, or I've got a ticker that I want to keep going in time with the server. I'll bind it to an Ajax event. You could use React for that. You can just fit it into little bits when you need it. You don't have to use it all the time, which really appealed to me, especially as someone who's a bit reticent about starting these sort of things. Like I said, I make calls to my own event library. You could just as easily use jQuery for it. You could use anything you want. You can use Facebook's Flow. You can use all sorts of different apps for it. So yeah, this slide about Lionel. So yeah, in terms of conclusions that I've drawn about using React, it's made me think very much about how I talk about my code, where it fits, how I kind of think about how I'm building my apps. I used to very much think about building distinct classes and building these kind of giant infrastructures of how things fit together. And I now think about it as small little components that slot together. And I also think separating concerns is very, very important. You should still have a single concept to deal with in a file. You should have a single concept to deal with a feature. You should only really be dealing with one thing at a time. That's the only way you can really do it properly. But those concerns shouldn't be, is this written in JavaScript? Is this written in HTML? It should be, what does this do? So it's less about languages, more about chunks of functionality. Other visual systems already work this way. Things like Flash used to. I've spent many a year making separate movie clips with nested movie clips and shared bits and bobs between them. iOS is very similar. Android, again, is similar, even down to using XML and everything for layouts. Paul, didn't the JavaScript-based cross-browser stuff you did, they had an XML layouts?
Yeah,
Titanium does, yeah. So it's a common pattern of having a kind of very descriptive structure of talking about how things should look, and it makes sense. So yeah, you can give React a go, see if you like it. It doesn't do everything. I wouldn't use it for small projects at all, but certainly for something that's very visual, it's very engaging, needs to be quick, there's lots of information flying around, definitely makes sense as a library. There's loads of holes in that talk, so if anyone's got any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Did you say it works well with jQuery? You can use it in tandem with jQuery?
Yeah, definitely. It's a bit of a funny fit, I think, in terms of I wouldn't be using the sizzle bit, I wouldn't be using the DOM selector with it. But yeah, you could easily use some of the shorthands in the ways that I might use the jQuery custom events library, or especially things like Ajax as well. I think there are Ajax libraries built into React anyway. But if you felt more comfortable using jQuery, you could just kind of ease into it, stick with what you mostly know, and just have a single React module or a small area, and kind of leave it fenced off, doing its own thing. Yeah?
Would you use it as a, as a client-side library or as a server-side, or could it be, would it be a node thing, or could you just include it as a normal JavaScript web?
People have, ever since things like Meteor, people have very much kind of tried to keep things working on both sides, and you can use something like Browserify to make it run on either on client or server side. Because I'm more of a Rubyist than a JavaScripter on the server side, I'd probably run something with Ruby on the back end and then have it running on the front end. But people do pre-compile JSX as well on the client side, and then they actually use that. I think people have done some exploration into using JSX tags into HTML. So actually it's a server-side templating library. I'm not quite sure how that fits on the sort of Saneometer, but yeah, I think you can explore and try different stuff. I think it's originally designed for the client side, so I'd give it a go on that. Interestingly, there is React Native as well, which people are using for doing iOS and Android apps, which essentially uses the same syntax of this kind of JavaScript and JSX tags, but instead of creating divs, you're creating UI views, and suddenly a lot of your thoughts and your components can all translate over from the browser into apps and into all sorts of different things. I don't know quite what's going on with the world of Windows, whether or not they're moving into there as well, but I would be amazed if they're not. Anyone else? No? Oh, Sean?
One of the cool things about React is you keep the state away from your view. So you change the state, then the view just picks up the changes. So I just wondered if you played with, you can do cool things with it, like if you throw an exception in your UI, you can save that state as a string and then bring the UI back to exactly the same point. You get your users to either email it to you or you can pick it up through logging or something.
Oh, wow.
I wonder if you played with any of that stuff.
I hadn't, I'm afraid. I've sort of dipped my toe in and found enough to make me feel I can talk for 45 minutes on it.
Does it work with HTML5 elements? Can you do things like use a canvas or even a 3D canvas with it?
Yeah, people have actually written
60 frames per second.
someone's written a Canvas library, React Canvas, that, as Sean has just said, is 60 frames a second. People are using it to create DOM elements that are rendered with Canvas, so that when your user is looking at it on a phone, for example, and they're scrolling through, all the click events are all worked out in Canvas, so that when you tap on the right bit of Canvas, it acts like a touch event, but it's got the rendering speed of the Canvas, so actually you end up with a much quicker turnaround in terms of UI. It's some of the clever stuff they've been doing with the Financial Times is that they're rendering a lot of their web page as Canvas, which is terrible for user experience or for accessibility. However, if you're using it visually, as the majority of people are, then you get the Canvas experience, and then if you're not, you get the fallback to standard HTML as well. But I think it's neat enough that you can actually write the components as is, and you just run it through a different compiler, and it comes out as Canvas with reams of JavaScript. So, but you can definitely use it. I've used it with video elements and all sorts of different things, and it's been Lionel using it with SVG, perfect, really good. It's been really nice being able to do. It's been really nice being able to do curves. So being able to draw curves sort of really quickly and smoothly. It's just like, this is just editing the attributes on an SVG element, but it's so neat and so quick and scalable. It's been really fun. It's been a really good option. Cool. Thank you very much. There's still a bit of pizza left if anyone wants to go back for seconds.